what you're seeing is the aftermath of an apparent Russian missile strike on a train station. And it's a train station that was specifically being used to move civilians, families, women, children from the incredibly dangerous eastern portion of Ukraine to the relatively safer western areas of Ukraine. And it was struck by a missile. Initial reports say that at least 50 people were killed, although we expect that those numbers will rise as time goes by. Another 98 at least injured. That's at the Kramatorsk train station in eastern Ukraine. They say it was a Russian missile strike. They say it was very clearly marked that would be a place that civilians were added, been used for quite some time to move people out of the region, and yet this happened. Now, the Washington Post was on the scene within about 15 minutes and they began the counting of the dead. I mentioned that really only to try to jump out in front of some of the false flag allegations. I know it's wasted effort because nothing like this can be accepted at even very rigorously reported face value. There's always an assumption that if it reflects poorly on someone, it's gotta be a false flag. But I wanna give you a little bit more information, including you can see on a map where the city is located. It is quite close to Donetsk and Luhansk in the eastern portion of Ukraine. And as a result of the massive loss of civilian life, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky accused Russia, quote, cynically destroying the civilian population, adding, this is an evil that has no limits. But before both of you jump in, bear in mind, the Russian Defense Ministry has denied any involvement in the strike. They said that Kyiv was responsible. Although we should bear in mind that they initially announced that they had carried out a successful strike until reports emerged that civilians had been killed, in which case they then said, oh, oops, that wasn't us, that was the Ukrainians themselves. Jordan, I'm gonna start with you. What do you think about this?
It's not surprising. This is an absolutely reprehensible government and militaristic operation. It's nothing short of disgusting. My heart goes out to the victims, and it's tough as an American to say, oh yeah, these are explicitly war crimes when the United States doesn't even participate in a global system or even recognize the International Criminal Court. So we have like a toothless response as Americans, and it's hard not to feel powerless in this. So I think the best thing the United States could do is recognize legitimacy in the authority of the ICC, and I think that would strengthen a global response to these types of actions. And within that is, reining in our own actions, joining the international treaty banning cluster munitions. This is something the United States has recently denounced when Russia did it, but we aren't signatories to that treaty either. So it's tough as an American to criticize what Russia is doing while it's objectively reprehensible when we do it ourselves. So I'm kind of struggling to kind of reconcile both of those things.
Jackson?
Yeah, so I think it's important to look and see that really what Putin's done is he's put Russia in such a position that they're gonna have to get bailed out big time. Russia's economy sunk so bad, their people are cornered in such a position to where Putin, as time drags on, and that's really the whole point of the sanctions, is for the public to turn against him. But him coming out and making statements like, nukes aren't off the table when he has more nuclear weapons than anyone else on earth, and him saying things like, the poorest countries on earth are gonna suffer because of the sanctions, as if he's a victim, when in reality, Russia's completely failed at framing this and messaging this to where they look like anything other than the aggressors, anything other than they're just trying to reestablish the Soviet Union as much as they can. But until Putin's gone, Russia's gonna be in a tough spot because the world doesn't want him there. And the longer that he keeps this up, as long as he's there, it's gonna be hard for them to really progress because they're gonna need a lot of help.
Yeah, and look, we know that he's probably gonna end up being perfectly fine because he's got enough money to set up multiple new countries if he wanted to. But we will have more info on new sanctions coming up in a bit. Totally agree with you, the prior point, Jordan, as well, in terms, like it reminds me of when we said initially that we had taken out terrorists in Afghanistan during our withdrawal, and then it turned out, no, we'd killed like 11 or 12 civilians with an airstrike. It was just people getting out of a car at a house in a neighborhood. Yep. Very similar to this, smaller scale, but not that much smaller. And look, to add, I guess, insult to massive, grievous, horrific injury. A missile fragment that was found near the train station was apparently inscribed with the words "for the children" written in Russian. And a Russian military analyst who monitors the Federation's troop movements had warned via telegram the day before the attack that evacuees should avoid rail routes. And you can see a picture right here. It's the sort of thing, as I talked about in the damage report this morning, when I see a headline like that there many kids had been killed, and then you find a missile with the words on it, my immediate thought is, well, come on, that can't possibly be true. I mean, that's going way too far. This gotta be Ukrainian propaganda, but nobody's come forward with any evidence that that's the case. And to your earlier point, Jordan, it is reminiscent of us writing things on bombs in our prior wars here at the US, or the stories from the Iraq invasion with people getting like biblical inscriptions on their firearms and things like that. It's anything goes, and there's no bottom.
Yeah, this really just reflects just the worst aspects of humanity. This is truly depraved, and the frame. I saw a linguist try to break down how that was used, and it was they said that "for the children" was presented in a way where it was like, oh, we're trying to help the children rather than this is targeting children, and it's just like it is completely detached from the realities of war. Like nothing, like no war is going to make children in that area and their lives better. It's just how war is. It's destructive, it's horrific, it's traumatizing, and this type of attempt to paper over this rot in society and human behavior is just a really, really depraved, cynical attempt.
Yeah, Jackson, thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, just everything Jordan said. This really just reveals the most negative aspects of human nature. And even though Putin had just about everything anybody could ever want, absolute power corrupts absolutely. So I think that's unfortunately will drag on for a while longer, and it'll probably get worse before it gets better. So